at her. She's not happy. I don't blame her.
Nope. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. And what you just heard, you'll hear again later in the show. We're going up north today, way up, west of Baxter State Park, just south of Chamberlain Lake, in and around the North Maine Woods Telos checkpoint. We're trapping spruce grouse. I'll explain within the first 5 minutes of the show. But essentially, these birds have a secret. They're doing pretty well in Maine's forests and not so well elsewhere. So what are we doing right? What are timber managers doing right? I'm in the woods helping to trap a few of them so that we can put radio collars on them and find out what they're doing. Naturally, the birds are going to fight us every step of the way. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Doors Equipment, Bar Harbor Whale Watch, Napa Auto Parts, EBS, and a Supercuts location near you. Now then, it's Tuesday night, July 5th. I'm sitting around a campfire with 3 University of Maine biologists. Tomorrow, we go catch us some grouse. Let's begin. So it's the end of the day. We haven't eaten supper yet, but we're sitting around the campfire. So let's go over the cast of characters here. We got Joel.
Hi there. How are you doing?
Good. We got Kyle.
Hey, how are you?
And we got Nate.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. Who's in charge here? What's the pecking order?
So I'm in charge. I'm a PhD student up here, and then these guys, Nate and Kyle, are my technicians for the summer.
Mm-hmm. So the way this pecking order normally works is the lower down you are, the more work you have to do. Is that work out here in the field?
To some degree.
Yeah.
It's pretty even. Maybe Joel might do more. It just depends on what type of work you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. If it's getting to be in the field, these guys get the best end of the stick. In terms of office work, I get to have fun with that.
Yeah, because you're on your way to your PhD with this.
Yes.
And so how many chapters? I mean, you've been doing this for about 3 years on this spruce grouse study?
So officially since 2014 is when I first came up here helping out a master's student, Steve Dunham, to start out with.
So the university is involved. Are there any other partners in all of this?
So it's the university and the Cooperative Forestry Research Unit at the University of Maine, as well as some collaboration with IF&W.
I can understand why you would do this with ruffed grouse, which is a game bird that's really highly cherished. But spruce grouse is not huntable in Maine. It's hard to find a lot of people who really care that much since you can't bring them home for dinner. Why spruce grouse?
So in the surrounding states, New York, New Hampshire, and Vermont, they're listed as either state threatened or endangered. And there's just really limited information in Maine about the status of the spruce grouse population. And we know it's stronger. And in the years past, for New York especially, they've been taking a few birds and translocating them down there to try to bolster the population. So having a good idea of the population status as well as how the forestry management practices are potentially influencing the populations for the demographics, so for regular adult survival, nest success, as well as recruitment.
Yeah, I think it was explained to me maybe 3 years ago that there's something about our forestry practices that is keeping a good population here, whereas it's winking out of existence in the Adirondacks, in the White Mountains, up in the Green Mountains of Vermont. It's just sort of disappearing, but not here. So you're sort of wondering why?
So sort of wondering why and looking to see what forest management practices are helping or hindering potentially, but mostly helping, it seems. The birds, especially the males in the spring, they're using their pre-commercially thin stands. The females are using the older clear cuts quite a bit. So as the literature suggests, some disturbance is likely going to be helping the grouse.
So in historic times, it might have been fire, it might have been beaver flooding, something would have caused regeneration with thick, good understory habitat, and it looks like our forestry practice may mimic that to some extent? Yeah,
that's the general thought. I mean, potentially altering the forest structure as well as the vegetative community with potentially more berries, more shrubs in the harvested areas.
So during this study that you're doing here, what are you actually doing?
In terms of field work?
Yeah. What do you? When I go out and see this, what is it you're actually doing out here?
So we're capturing the birds using either chick distress calls for the females, or earlier in the year, recording of a flutter flight and a canis call for the males. After capturing them, we're taking some morphometric measurements to kind of assess general body condition, then placing a radio collar on them and monitoring them periodically. And in those areas we find them, we'll then do vegetation sampling, and a little bit later on in the season we'll do the vegetation sampling at the nest sites.
Yeah, and the sampling is important because, once again, you're trying to figure out why we have them, why they're doing well.
Yes.
So the status of the forest matters in the vegetation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And so I mean, it's a conservation issue as well as wanting to know the general question of what exactly is being done here that could potentially transfer to elsewhere.
So if spruce grouse were really as dumb as they act, they'd all be dead by now. They're actually kind of tricky sometimes.
They can be tricky. As you'll see tomorrow with the capture method, sometimes you cannot believe how, we could say, trusting they are.
Yeah.
Other times they are certainly a little bit more wily and difficult to approach and or difficult to capture.
Well, they're clever little dickens, because they'll just sit up there frozen and watch you. I mean, you can almost hear them giggle because they know they fooled you.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, evolutionarily, like, they didn't have us as predators. So flying up to a branch and you have a martin come up the tree, it's one quick flight to get away from that martin or potentially hawk or whatever other predator may be coming after them. So, I mean, to us it seems foolish or trusting, but in the past, I mean, it's obviously a strategy that's worked, and based on their food, what they're eating with the conifer needles, probably don't have a whole lot of extra energy to spare, especially during the winter. So conserving that energy while also getting away seems that might be the secret of their nature.
Yeah, because spruce needles can't be that nutritious. It basically sustains them for the winter, right?
Yeah, I mean, generally they have a relatively high survival during the winter. One of the things we'll be looking at this fall is it tends that we have greater number of mortalities in the fall, and while it's unknown all the exact causes, there's certainly accidental harvest, as well as that dietary shift is likely pretty hard on them, because especially the juveniles are still growing a little bit. They're becoming independent, they're dispersing, they're in areas that are unfamiliar, so higher risk of predation, more mobility, so probably more conspicuous as well. Which is true for all young birds. When you're a juvenile, you haven't learned the ways of the world yet, that's when you're most likely to kick the bucket. Yes, it definitely seems that way. We're talking about spruce grouse. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is up in the Telos area west of Baxter State Park. We're sitting around a campfire discussing a project that is trying to figure out why spruce grouse in Maine are doing better than anywhere else in the Northeast. It has something to do with our forestry practices, but we're not exactly sure what. Maybe if we can figure it out, we can keep doing it, and we can give some advice to New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York. Tomorrow, we'll be trapping some and putting radio collars on them to learn where they're going and what they're doing. This project has been going on for 3 years. So have we learned anything yet? Well, that's the next question. It's Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine, and this is Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. Welcome back to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. Today's show is coming to you from the North Maine woods. I'm up here in the Telos area west of Baxter, sitting around the campfire with Joel Teppenkamp, a doctoral candidate at the University of Maine, and his two technicians in the project, Kyle and Nate. They're catching and radio collaring spruce grouse, trying to figure out what it is about the Maine forest that is more grouse-friendly than other northeastern states. Vermont and New York have lost most of their grouse, and we haven't. So what are we doing right? Joel is doing most of the talking, and he's been at this for 3 years. So can you put your finger on anything you've learned yet? So I have not had the opportunity to fully analyze my data yet. Yeah, but you must have suspicions. Oh, yeah, certainly suspicions. it seems that they are making good use of the managed forests, but understanding whether it's simply a usage issue or does this aid in their survival rather than just simply use.
Now, at some point, you're going to finish your PhD and move on to bigger and better things. How long is this study going to go on, do you think, with new people filling in? How long is the research going to go on?
So I have one more field season, and ideally, there would be another student that could continue following up on this work as well.
Kyle, is that going to be you?
Unfortunately, I'm not old enough yet.
This is a game bird in some states and provinces.
Yes.
Have you ever tasted one?
I have.
What was it like?
I thought it was pretty tasty. I'm from Minnesota where you can legally hunt them. Yeah, I thought they were good. You have to cook it correctly, and the people you talk to here say they taste horrible. Oh no, I shouldn't have shot it, but it tasted horrible anyway.
Well, I always figured it tasted like turpentine because of their diet.
I had no issues with it.
Well, I actually researched this online to see what recipes were out there.
Yeah.
And every recipe I ever found covered it in blueberry or cranberry sauce. Is that what it takes to make it edible, or was it really better than that?
I thought it was good. As I recall, we just a little bit of marinade and pan fry, and I mean, they're already blueberry marinated by the end of the summer anyway. So. I mean, they hit the blueberries quite hard.
Now, these are illegal to hunt in Maine, but they must get shot all the time anyway, because they do, especially the hens, resemble ruffed grouse quite a bit.
Yeah, it's likely they do get shot a fair amount, and being up during the fall, we may have the opportunity to find more mortalities quickly, and so we'll see.
Have any of your collared birds ever been shot?
Yes. You also see... I don't want to say a lot, but a few collars here and there that are just a good arm's throw from the side of the road, with no other sign of anything. So that's a relatively good indication that it may have been human-induced mortality.
What other mortality threats are there out there for them? I mean, what are their main predators, and what goes wrong for them?
So I definitely think the raptors are going to be a factor. In terms of nest predators, not that much is known. Certainly the other carnivores such as marten, coyote, things like that could enjoy snacking on them as well.
Well, most of them stay in the thick places where it'd be a little difficult for a raptor to get to them, or even a coyote. Is it when they present themselves out on roadsides that they're more threatened?
Likely for a raptor, if they're along the roadside, they're going to be a little more threatened. Certainly the open areas with, if there's not so much low brush that they can hide under, I mean, and the hens, when they're tending their broods, I mean, will often sit on a stump overlooking all her brood, so she's pretty visible.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, let's talk about dust baths, because they absolutely love their dust baths. They'll come out roadside or any place that's a little bit sunny that's dried out the sand and get themselves all dusted up.
Yep, get all the parasites cleaned off.
Yeah, that must make them a little bit vulnerable to predators.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, when they don't have the structure for both visual concealment as well as for evading predators, they're certainly likely to have a few more issues.
And I don't know about some of them, but I've had hens who have just come right after me and scolded me. That can't be a good behavior for longevity.
Well, I mean, by the time they're doing that, they've got a brood, and they've invested a lot in that brood already, so...
I don't know. I had a hen late last September who just came right, I mean, she was just out there dusting. I didn't detect any other chicks or young around. She just had attitude. What was it with her? No idea.
Bad day.
A bad day, yeah. Well, I guess switching to you guys, this is a project that you'll do most of the summer?
Yes.
And into the fall?
Yep. So the three of us will be going through the summer, and then starting in the fall, we'll have a couple technicians up here doing some behavioral observations to better understand why the spruce grouse males are displaying in the fall as well as the spring.
I didn't know they displayed in the fall. And is there any explanation for that, or are you trying to figure that out?
I'm trying to figure that out. I mean, there's All I could say right now is it would be speculation. It could be a territorial thing. It could be mate prospecting, but I look forward to teasing that apart. That'll be a very interesting thing to learn about. And I mean, they're not the only birds that do that. Rough grouse do the same. And I mean, it's a lot of energy. It's risky. So unless they're just being fooled by photo period, which it seems relatively unlikely, I expect there could be something going on.
On the other hand, they're not exactly geniuses.
No, most chicken-like birds aren't.
Yeah. Well, early summer was hot, dry, and buggy. Which one of you cracked first?
I don't think any of us have cracked.
Wasn't that bad?
No.
No? Okay.
I mean, there were a couple days with black flies that we had some bloody necks and a lot of pock marks, but...
Well, I guess that was my next question. Mosquitoes, black flies, or deer flies, which one would you send back to hell first?
I know for these guys it's mosquitoes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
For me, I'm not sure. Like, the first year, the biting flies were the worst because you can cover yourself with DEET and they don't care.
Right.
I mean, really, it just comes down to long sleeves, head net, long pants, even gloves when needed, and you can make it through.
Moose, bear, or mice? Which one gives you the most trouble?
Probably mice.
Mice.
Yep.
But you're in an area where you must see moose and bear relatively often?
Yeah, we've seen quite a few bear, quite a few moose. I mean, they're probably in the water right now, hiding from the flies and cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've seen quite a few this year.
Oh, sure. Out here on the Telos Road, I had a bear out in the Telos Road, and then I had one on the Harvester Road right close by. It was, they're not that hard to come by this time of year.
No, this time of year, no.
What is surprising is as we're walking in the woods trying to use radio telemetry to find our radioed birds, we never run into moose or bear at all.
Is that because they can hear you coming, or? Yeah.
I mean, they hear our footsteps plus a beep, beep, beep. So.
Well, that and the fact that when you're chasing grouse into the woods, it's usually pretty thick habitat where you've got to be slamming your way through dead branches.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yep. Okay, so what have I got myself into? What time do we start in the morning, and what are we going to do?
So tomorrow morning we'll head out and go try to track a couple birds, do some chick distress calls to try to capture some more new birds, and then maybe a little bit later on some more telemetry and or vegetation sampling.
And what time's all that start?
Yeah. Probably like 5:30.
Oh, okay. So well after sunrise.
Yeah. We can see. I'll check the weather again tonight and see how warm it's going to get, and if it looks like it's going to heat up pretty quickly, we can start earlier for the trapping for sure.
Well, I'm sleeping right here, so it's not going to matter to me.
Perfect.
I'm going to be in the back of my car. I'll be awake at 4 a.m.
They tell you not to leave children or dogs in the car, but
Leave yourself.
Yeah, but disc jockeys are expendable like grad students.
a comforting thought.
So that sets up tomorrow. Once again, here's the scene. I'm sitting around a campfire with Joel, Nate, and Kyle. Tonight, I sleep in my car up here on the Telos Road west of Baxter State Park. At dawn, we're going to find, catch, and collar spruce grouse. It's not the craziest thing I've done this year, but it's probably tied for number one. I'm going to nap for 3 minutes while we take a break, and when I return, it'll be dawn and time for the hunt. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. .30 a.m. Hey, I can still do it. I can still sleep in the back of a Subaru Forester. Which is pretty remarkable, because dinner last night was 2 bratwursts, beans, and macaroni and cheese. If you're just joining this show, it's Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. Saturday mornings at 9, Sunday mornings at 8. We're on the Telos Road west of Baxter State Park. It's now wicked early, and I've climbed out of my car, eaten some blueberry biscuits, and prepared for a day of catching spruce grouse. Part of a scientific research study trying to figure out why we haven't accidentally killed most of them off, like they've done in other states. we're doing something right, and we don't even know what. Spruce grouse. It's a cousin to the ruffed grouse, the grouse some people call a partridge. Ruffed grouse is Maine's most popular game bird. Spruce grouse is the same size, but otherwise acts very differently. It's not legal to hunt them in Maine, and they don't really fear humans. They don't fly away fast whenever somebody comes near. Usually, they'll freeze and hope you don't notice. If they're up in a tree, you probably won't notice. Ruffed grouse are everywhere. Spruce grouse stay in deep stands of spruce and balsam fir, and that's about it. But other states in the Northeast have those stands. Yet their spruce grouse are declining. Apparently ours aren't. And we're putting radio collars on some of ours to figure out why. Our first target of the morning is a hen who was collared a year ago. Batteries last about a year, so this collar is due for replacement. Because scientists were able to track her, they know where she nested. They know how many chicks she's got. And she's around here somewhere. We're on a side road, off the Telos Road, north of the Golden Road, just north of Harrington Lake. We're walking an old skidder path, and suddenly it comes without warning. Mama spruce grouse are very protective of their young. They'll freeze in the understory, but if you get too close, they will suddenly burst out and charge you, hoping to rattle you, hoping to get you to run away. And that's what she did. It might have worked too, except that we've got a capture stick, a handy device for grabbing a spruce grouse. And we've got her. We put her in a pillowcase while we finish the chores. That quiets her down until we're done. And we let her go.
Yep.
She's away.
Yes, indeed. Cool.
Yeah. Now back in the truck, on to our next destination.
Well, it's just past 7 in the morning, and already we've had an adventure. We've had one moose in the salt shed, one bear on our way down near our stop for spruce grouse. Then we went into the woods, and we actually captured a female that had been radio collared, and she was sweet, a little angry.
Definitely more angry than sweet, I think. But
Yeah.
always fun to capture a bird.
Yeah. I was thinking this over. When you do a scientific study like this, there's at least 2 ways you can go about it.
Oh, and
Well, there's a
got
deer in the road.
now.
Yep. I'm starting to see more deer up here than I used to.
Yeah, it's nice.
back.
Everybody's saying that, and
Yeah.
I think after a few hard winters,
Yeah. So there's 2 ways you could do it. You could grid off the forest into different habitats and then check to see if the grouse is in a habitat. Or you can go find the grouse and see what habitat they're using. What determined the decision?
So the previous study was based around certain habitats, so certain stands that had established transects and were either pre-commercially thinned or pre-commercially thinned as well as herbicided in the past, or quote-unquote mature, which we deem 60 plus because that's what we could find. But for my study, we decided to go more with the following them route. Largely because in order to get the sample size, we couldn't simply restrict ourselves to certain stands. Some of the stands which we were surveying were areas that the occurrence of grouse was so amazingly low, it wouldn't have necessarily been beneficial. And with the methods that can be used now with the multiple observations of the same individual, that we decided that this analysis would work out well for answering the questions of what habitats are used and what habitats are selected, being use versus availability, as well as looking at the demographic rates.
Now, when you're actually searching for grouse, do you simply drive the roads until you see one? Or do you pick out certain areas that you think, hey, that looks good, let's walk this section?
During the fall, when they're coming out to the roads more, we'll drive to find them. In the summer and spring, when either the males are displaying or the hens have broods and will be responsive to the chick distress calls like you saw just a little bit earlier, we can go to stands that were historically surveyed by Steve, as well as go into areas that we may be able to find spruce grouse. We don't want to more or less high grade, and only go to the stands that we think, oh, this is great spruce grouse habitat, because if we were to do that, we simply would find the habitat that's great, that we think is great, although they certainly will move from that habitat.
Because if you just pick the points that look good, the results wouldn't say that, hey, this is what's good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, that was one thing that I had to be cognizant about, and I think that's another thing where the road surveys are really helpful. One, it's a productive trapping time, and two, we're selecting a broader range of habitat where we may see grouse on the road picking gravel or dusting.
So how often do you actually look for evidence of grouse in part of your search, as in scat or dust bats?
So I mean, always keep an eye open for it, and so if you see scat, you can't necessarily determine whether it's spruce grouse or rough grouse, depending on the content, especially during the summer where it's going to be mostly berries and leaves.
Yeah.
During other times of year when you see needles, it's a little more obvious.
Yeah, I can't really tell the scat apart in some seasons, except maybe by taste.
Taste, smell, yeah, I mean.
Now this is a bunch of roads up here that all have no road signs. At what point did you say, I'm finally familiar with all these roads?
It took a couple months to really know the areas well. My first year up here working with Steve Dunham, we had certain stands that we surveyed, so getting to drive the same roads over and over and just looking at the maps really helped. I mean, every once in a while a new road will pop up that I'm like,
yeah.
I didn't know that was there. And given that the harvesting is going on, it very well may not have been there previously.
This is probably an obvious question, but you've got the gear to go find the grouse. You've got radio collar you can use telemetry to get in there. Once you're in there, do you know your way out? Do you use GPS or some tool to make sure you don't get lost?
So yeah, I always carry a compass and take note of what direction am I going in, where the other roads are, as well as have a GPS to either find your way out, but generally and most importantly to mark the location of where the bird was found so we can come back and sample the vegetation there.
Yeah, so you would use a GPS to find you already have those stored in your coordinates so you know where that is.
Yep, so for the vegetation sampling, we'll type that in. So each time we find a bird, we record the coordinates, date, time, and other pertinent info, such as, was it alone, did it have a brood, how did it act upon being found. For example, the bird we just found acted very broody. No chicks seen, 2 observers responded to chick distress calls.
And 1 mad hen.
Yes, 1 very displeased hen.
Good.
Cool.
My guest is Joel Tebenka, a grad student at the University of Maine. There is a secret about the productivity of Maine's northern forest, and only a chicken-like bird called a spruce grouse knows what it is. We're trying to find out. We're heading off to another logging road where these critters reside. It'll take us about 3 minutes to get there, which coincidentally is about as long as this next break. You're listening to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. Today's show is taking place deep in the Maine woods. For 3 years, University of Maine biologists have been studying a bird called a spruce grouse, trying to figure out why we've got a healthy population of them when other states near us are losing theirs. To that end, we're putting radio collars on birds, and then we check up on them to see what part of the forest they're using. Right now, we're looking for some new spruce grouse to collar. Grouse don't live very long because many animals like to eat them. So you've got to have plenty of grouse collared so you have enough to study. As this segment begins, we're walking a road, me and Joel Tebenka, who is doing this study as part of his doctoral program. Joel has gone back to get the truck, so I'm walking this one alone. I know this road. I've been on it before. It doesn't get much use, and it's a little rough right now. Looking down the road, I can see that I'm not very far from the edge of Baxter State Park, maybe just a few miles away to my east. Okay, so far I'm a failure. I've been given the tools for finding grouse. Joel has gone back to get the truck. I'm walking a road called the Turnpike Road, which is not far outside of Nesatahunk Lake. I can see Center Mountain dead ahead of me, which is inside Baxter State Park. And I'm looking for spruce grouse and coming up empty. I have found dust baths. I have found loads of scat, but no bird. Dust baths, by the way. A lot of birds do this. You may have seen turkeys do this. A lot of birds will actually get into a little dusty area and fluff their feathers up inside the dust, which soothes the skin and gets rid of some parasites, sort of smothers the parasites and gives the birds a lot of relief. And they leave behind these dust-shaped bowls. And if you keep your eyes out, you can find a lot of them in the Maine woods, because rough grouse do it, spruce grouse do it, turkeys do it. I've seen flickers and merlins and other birds do it. And I'm finding lots of those. I'm just not finding any birds. Altogether, we bumped along that road for 6 miles. No grouse. We finally get back out on the Telos Road, head south, and run into Kyle. Kyle has been out checking some of the collared grouse, making observations about where they are and what part of the forest they're using. He reports that he just saw a hen on the Rip Stream Road and that she was behaving as if she had babies in the woods. So we head there, search for a little bit, and sure enough, we can hear her clucking in the understory. The chase begins. We play a couple of audio tricks on her, and up she pops. She's in a bush right in front of us. She gives us the evil eye for a moment, then she gives us the slip. She gets back under cover where she's hard to capture. Joel tries to approach from the side, but she's a wily bird. She won't leave her chicks. But every time Joel gets in position, she flies to another low branch just out of reach. I come in from the other side, just enough to convince her not to flutter that way, and Joel gets down on his knees to get under the brush, and then under her. She flies again. She's not really scared for herself. She's rather mad, and she soon starts clucking, which tells us to go away and tells her chicks that Mommy is handling things just fine. Oh, that was a good sound. I agree.
If I can get out underneath her, that's the trick.
Right. And she is handling things just fine. We saw 3 tricks initially, but they're now up in a nearby tree, and we don't see them again. Oh, she's even better there. This whole battle goes on for several minutes. Many grouse aren't this hard to snatch with a capture stick. They'll often just get up on a branch and scold. Slowly, Joel gets into a better position. So does the grouse, actually. She's now in a more exposed branch where she can be reached without banging into other brush and branches. Got her.
I want her to escape on me.
Right, yeah. You're never catching this one again. Now the routine begins. First, she goes in the pillowcase. When she can't see danger or any possible escape, she stops fluttering. Mostly. She'll flutter once in a while. Meanwhile, we dig out the radio and banding equipment. Then Joel reaches gently into the bag and turns her head upward so that her wings are still enclosed with the bag, but her neck is exposed so we can slip the radio collar on. We actually have to do it twice. She's a little on the light side, and the first collar is too loose. After it's secure, she gets a leg band. Then Joel takes the measurements. She's just over 400 grams, not even a pound. He also measures the wing, leg, and beak. That'll not only give an indication of how she is when compared to other grouse, but also to see how she's doing when she's recaptured and measured next year. Eventually, it's over. Joel carries her into the shade, lets her go, and that's it.
Put her in the shade. There we go.
They'll track her by radio for the summer, and see how she's doing and how the brood is doing.
So what did we just do?
Yeah, we just captured a female spruce grouse. She was an adult. She had 3 chicks. She did not necessarily want to cooperate, but eventually, with Bob cutting her off at the road and coming in behind, we ended up getting her.
No grouse gets by me.
No.
So you did measure her, weigh her, take some signs to see how healthy she is, where she is in terms of normal?
So she's a little bit on the lighter side. She's going to come in right around 400 grams, which is a little light, but not too bad. This time of year, they've probably still catching up after the nesting season and taking care of a nest as well as a brood.
How long is the radio good for, and the batteries in it?
Should last about 1 year.
And if she's not around next year, you might find the radio color around some fox scat.
Fox scat or
Coyote.
martin, lynx.
Not bad. We captured 1 grouse and collared her. We recaptured another grouse for her annual tune-up, and it's not even noon yet. We have another chore to do before lunch. One of the males over near Williams Pond is reported to have a stick stuck in his radio collar. Now that's not good. The collars are designed so that they don't impede the birds and make them vulnerable. But a stick could slow a bird down. Up next, we break out the telemetry gear and we go look for him. And along the way, we get another surprise. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. Welcome back to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. If you're just joining us, this is going to be a little hard to explain, but here's the short version. There is something about the Maine forest that makes it different from similar forests in New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York. And the way we know that is a bird called a spruce grouse is doing pretty well in our northern forest, not so well in those other states. University of Maine researchers, the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and even the landowners themselves would like to know what that is. If you can manage a working forest in a way that harvests trees but doesn't harm wildlife, you're doing something extraordinary. And apparently, we are. So we're putting radio collars on spruce grouse and watching how they use the forest. I'm up in that forest. We're just west of Baxter State Park, and right now we're on a rescue mission. One of the radio-collared grouse managed to get a stick caught in his collar. That's bad. So we're tracking a signal, and we'll try to grab him and fix things. Joel Tebenkamp is the grad student conducting the field work. He's holding up the antenna and turning it around in an attempt to pick up the signal of our wayward grouse. It's there, but it's faint. The bird is a long way into the woods. The signal can be picked up from over a mile away, though it's a much shorter distance if there's a hill or something in the way.
Okay, back down this road, I guess. To where we started in the morning.
Safety first. We're going to have to go right through the brush. Joel has given me a pair of goggles because this is going to get a little messy. The signal is still weak. The bird is still distant, and there is no road or trail leading into these woods. Every time we get to a good place to stand up and raise the antenna, we get a fix on the direction, but it's not going well. Eventually, things get a little easier. There's an old skidder trail in here. This was probably harvested 20 years ago or so. Suddenly, we get a little surprise. There's another hen just ahead of us. She slinks low and scurries away, trying not to be seen. That's a behavior that says she doesn't have chicks. But we're wrong. She does. We see at least one fly up into a tree and disappear. So she's not going anywhere. Collaring 1 grouse in a day is pretty good. Collaring 2? Hey, let's do it. This one is more cooperative. She sticks around, guarding her brood. She hops up into a low tree, then a higher one, then circles around us, and then pops down onto a lower branch. Joel misses with the capture stick a couple of times, but pretty soon, we've got her. This one is a little heavier than our first, and she's a little calmer, probably because she didn't work herself into a lather, putting up quite the fight the last one did. She gets the radio collar, the leg band, the measurements, and before too long, she gets released. In fact, as Joel reaches out to let her go, she just sits there in his hand for a moment, and then takes off to a low branch and just watches us while we pack up the gear. back on the trail. We've still got a signal on the male grouse, but we're still a long way in the woods, and the signal isn't getting any stronger. The brush is getting thicker. The old skidder trail is pretty much petered out. We claw our way to a place where we can stand up straight and raise the antenna to full arm's length. The gain on the receiver is still very high, and the signal is still hissy. If we can get the gain down under 5, we're getting close. But this bird is still distant, and we're already an hour late getting back to the rendezvous. Joel decides that this bird has probably lost his stick because he seems pretty mobile and is likely up in a tree where capture would have been difficult anyway. After a few checks of the compass and GPS, we come into a more recent skidder trail and head back out to the truck.
Sure.
So we've been using radio telemetry for the last several hours, and I still have no idea what the hell you're doing. So how does all that work?
So basically, the easiest way to think about it, it's a game of hot and cold. The louder the beep, the closer you're getting, and using the antenna, you can find out what direction the beep is and follow that as best as possible in order to find the bird. And each one has a different radio collar that we were placing on this morning with a unique frequency. So you can dial that into the telemetry receiver and then go follow the bird, either find the nest if it's nesting season, check on the alive dead status, find a brood, check to see if she still has a brood, and then ultimately we'll be able to come in and do vegetation sampling in those areas where we found the birds previously.
Now it gives you a different beep when the bird's dead. How does that work?
So there's it's either a mortality switch or activity switch, either way you can call it. But if it's stationary for 6 hours, which is not likely to happen in a bird, it starts beeping faster. So then you can identify, okay, this bird is likely dead, and go into the location and find potentially the cause of mortality.
Now these radio collars, sometimes you just find them and figure out what killed them. I mean, you may be able to tell signs from the predator.
Yep, so with the mammalian predators, more munched feathers, whereas with the avian predators, you're going to have more of a poof ball and a plucking.
Yeah. And with any luck, you'll find the collar right there?
Yes, sometimes it's harder than others. They blend in quite well. Often it's just listening and you don't really see the collar, but you step on something and the radio switches from the faster beep to the slower beep. You just stop and you think, okay, well, where are the last 3 places I stepped? And that's generally where you find the radio.
Yeah. Where does the budget for all this come from? Grants? Is it support from the timber industry?
So one of the largest contributors is the Cooperative Forestry Research Unit,
right?
Which is a bunch of the folks from the timber industry, large landowners, taxing themselves in order to do research for both timber production as well as wildlife research in the forest ecosystem, managed forest landscapes.
Yeah, they've done a lot of work on deer too. It's pretty impressive.
Yep, they've done deer, grouse. This is the second grouse project. Various projects.
That's something we should repeat. This is the industry taxing itself in order to support this research. They do care about their own lands as much as anybody does.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've got to look out for the future as well, and they're tasked with having a productive ecosystem, and so they need to know how to harvest that's going to be good for the soil as well as be good for producing timber and wildlife as well.
Well, basically, wildlife is often a sign of how healthy a forest is.
Yes.
It's like canary in the coal mine.
Indeed. Yep.
You know, we talk a lot in the state about the necessity for good landowner relations, and respecting the fact that this is private land they're letting us use for our own recreation.
Absolutely, yes.
But they actually take it a step further. They watch their forest and manage their forest well enough to support the hunting and fishing that actually happens on it.
Yes, so I mean, with the North Maine woods, where I am doing much of my work for the summer, I mean, the fees for the road use, and so they're maintaining the roads for recreation as well as for the logging industry.
Yeah. North Maine Woods Association has gotten a whole lot of my money so far this year. I've been up here a lot.
I bet. I'm luckily as a researcher up here every day, I don't need to pay the day use fees. Hey there, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Doing well.
Good.
I'll see you a little bit later.
And I'll see you a little bit later. We're at the North Maine Woods checkpoint. 3 grouse, 3 moose, 1 bear. Not a bad morning driving around up here in the Telos area. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine returns next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 8. And it's always archived online at 929theticket.com. Brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Doors Equipment, Bar Harbor Whale Watch, Napa Auto Parts, EBS, and a Supercuts location near you. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.